Welcome back to our ongoing series of conversations with Apple TV Plus creators and showrunners about writing and producing. Today we're talking to Dana Fox, creator, showrunner, and writer of Home Before Dark. Hi, Dana.
Hi, how are you?
I am very, very happy to talk to you. And I have so many questions and so little time, so I'm going to be like a laser with my questions.
I love it.
Uh, if you haven't seen all 10 episodes, and what's your problem? Why haven't you seen it? Home Before Dark is the story about a 9-year-old reporter who, in her own paper, uncovered a crime in her small town and became a national sensation. And what Dana and her team has done is created a 10-episode series based on a 9-year-old heroine, which is fantastic. So I'm very curious, how did this story come to you, or how did you come to it?
Well, my good friend Joy Gorman, who's an incredible producer, she was at the Tribeca Disruptor Awards, and she was watching all these adults get up on stage and accept their awards. And then up walks this little 9-year-old girl who was just so self-possessed, just came from this like incredible place inside her that she has this drive to figure out what the truth is, and that she doesn't remember ever not wanting to be a reporter. So, you look at her and she's like 9 years old, and she's talking about when she was a kid, and how she fell in love with journalism and reporting, and how she always knew she wanted to be a journalist. And so she ended up making up her own paper and just starting to report on stuff. Her father was a journalist, so he taught her, okay, who, what, when, where, why, these are the basic questions. This is kind of how you do it. And she was just like a fish who found her water. She was so into it. And, Joy was just so impressed with her, and how, as I said, self-possessed she was, and how she kind of had this thing inside her that no one had taught her or given to her. She just felt very driven to find the truth. And it really resonated with Joy. And so she started talking to the people sitting at the table next to her and saying how incredible this little girl was. And those people turned out to be Hildy's parents. And, she said, oh my God, you guys are incredible. I have a daughter. Like, will you come move into my house with me and help me raise my daughter? Like, how did you make this girl so great? So they kind of struck up a relationship through that. And then I think there were a ton of producers who kind of understood that this was an interesting story, and that the life rights were something worth trying to get. So a bunch of different producers were trying to get it. And, Joy ended up winning. And after the fact, she said, hey, why did you choose me? And her parents said, look, you had all these amazing things to recommend you. You're an incredible producer. And they said, but honestly, the deciding factor was that you were the only person who spoke directly to Hildy. You're the only one that on the phone call with us asked her the questions and asked her what she wanted to do and what she envisioned for herself. And they said, for them, they just wanted someone who took their daughter as seriously as they did. That was it, And so they found an amazing partner in Joy. And then she immediately reached out to me and said, oh my God, I have this story that you have to write. Joy and I were friends and worked together for 20 years. So she had randomly seen like a bunch of home movies of me as a child and knew that I was like a super dork, just like Hildy. I was like, when I was in first grade, it was Christmas time, and I was like, please get me a Filofax. I don't want any toys. I don't want any, and my parents were like, you're in first grade, you don't have any appointments. So they didn't get it for me, obviously, because that was insane. And so I came down and there was a few toys there, and I just had like one gigantic tear rolled up my cheek. And so they said, all right, fine, if you return all your toys, you can have a Filofax. So got rid of all the toys. I got the Filofax, and I started like making my plans. So Joy just said, oh, this little girl reminds me so much of you when you were little. Like, you got it. You have to write this story. And then at that point, I, for about a year, was working on Cruella de Vil for Emma Stone at Disney. And I was kind of learning how to do 4-quadrant movies, and the way that every scene has to have something in it that is for every demographic. It's a very specific thing that they and Pixar do, which is very hard to do, because they're trying to make things that feel very universal, but not by making them feel like they're all things to all people. They sort of do it by trying to be very specifically what it is. So I had kind of been thinking about stuff in that way. And I kept thinking, yes, Joy, I want to do this project, but I couldn't find my way into it. And if you hear like Hildy cracks the case, you might think like, oh, it's this very like little kiddie thing. And I just had no interest in that. Honestly, like I don't want to watch those things. I didn't want to watch them when I was a child. I definitely don't want to watch them now. I don't want to write them. I don't want to spend my life doing them. So I couldn't really figure out how to crack it. And then I talked to Hildy and her dad. And one of the sort of things I didn't really realize was part of the story, because she had kind of gotten famous for going viral when she scooped the local paper on a murder. And that was sort of all I knew. But when I talked to Matt and Hildy, I got a little bit more into it. And what I found out was that what had actually happened was that Matt, who, as I said, was a journalist, um, had reported on some really dark stuff and gotten incredibly sad and kind of disillusioned with journalism. And he had quit his job and moved the entire family away from New York back to his small hometown. And he basically was like, I'm out. I can't do it anymore. And that was when Hildy kind of said, look, you may not be a journalist anymore, but I still am. And she started going out and reporting on stuff. And that's when she scooped the local paper on a murder. And the key piece for me, though, was that Matt said that it was Hildy's pure love of journalism and her unwillingness to give up. And the fact that when all of these haters came after her, she didn't just sort of roll over and play dead. She actually put the comments online and name checked everybody. And he said just watching her just so purely love it is what actually ended up bringing him out of his depression and bringing him back to journalism. And that was the part where I was like, oh, that's a story I have to tell. Like that I know how to do and I understand what that is. It felt profoundly universal, because a little plucky 9-year-old who is a journalist who has their own newspaper is really not universal. Like no one else does that. That's just Hildy. Like she's crazy and I love her for it. But what is universal is this desire to save our parents. Save your father is like a really strong theme, I think, in a lot of things. It's something that I really relate to. And just this willingness, this desire to try to understand your parents better, and your parents' own sadness coming out when you're a kid, that all felt like really fertile ground. And I got really excited about the project once I sort of knew what my way in was. And then I kept saying to Joy, I have this tone in my head that is so specific. It's not like anything I've ever seen before. It involves things that I have seen. Like I want it to feel like what I felt like when I was a kid, sitting on the couch, watching these Amblin movies with my whole family, where I was like, ooh, I'm not supposed to be watching this, but my parents are letting me watch it. And it's like, ooh, it's dark and I shouldn't be allowed to see this. And I wanted that feeling back. But at the time I was listening to Serial, which is like a true crime podcast that is like, and I don't know if you got into it, but at the time I remember being like,
it's a sensation. You couldn't avoid it.
I was losing my mind. And I was listening to it like as they were releasing it week to week. And so I was like, oh my God, where's the next episode? I'm going to die. And so I knew I wanted it to feel that bingey. And so I kept saying to her, like, does it make sense to combine this like 4-quadrant Amblin movie with a bingeable true crime podcast like Serial? Like, how does that even make sense? And Joy at the time had finished shooting the first season of 13 Reasons Why, but it had not come out yet and no one had seen it. And so she sort of secretly let me see a couple episodes. And she said, look, we're doing this thing that we always call my so-called life meets Serial. So like there is a way to do it. And she said, what's exciting about it? And they didn't know that that was going to turn into a global phenomenon. That was just Joy being confident that she and Brian had something special. And she just said, look, I'm excited by trying to do stuff I've never seen before. Like, I don't want to keep trying to do the thing I've seen before. I want to try and like change the world a tiny bit and speak to kids and say something important and kind of like invent a new genre. And so she just encouraged me like, hey, yeah, we can do that. Let's not give up on that crazy tone when everybody says to us over and over again, but who is it for? Who is it for? We just kept saying it's for everybody. It's for co-viewing. It's for anybody who's ever been a kid, for kids, for adults. It's for everybody.
Writers see the finished product fully formed and they often will think, how do I do that? You said you found your way in with a father-daughter relationship. Did that take a week, a month, 6 months?
Oh God. Well, I tend to like marinate on stuff for a really, really long time. So Joy and I had been talking about the idea for about a year. And in that year, I kept kind of like letting it come in and out of my head. I had other stuff going on, but it kept coming in and out. And then the father-daughter thing, once that clicked in for me, I was like, oh, now I know what we're doing here. Now I've got this, because now I understand the emotional core of it. Because for me, I'm not really interested in things that are like plot for the sake of plot, because I never care about plot. I only ever care about character. And to me, plot isn't real. That's not a thing. It's all character. So once I had my way in with the character stuff, then that was when we kind of were like, okay, but yes, that's a great big idea, but how do we really like day to day do that? And what does like the day to day episode look like in that version? Are we doing a case of the week? Where Hildy cracks something every single time. And again, that for me came down to, I don't like watching that stuff. I don't think that that is my strength. So I wasn't particularly interested in that. And, I had never really worked in this specific sort of mystery space before. And that's when Joy hooked me up with this awesome writer, Dara Resnick, who co-created the show with me. And, she and I started talking more specifically about like, well, what's the case? And like, what is it going to feel like day to day? And so we had a lot of conversations at that stage. And, honestly, I think writing is one of those things where, for me at least, the ideas are the hard part. The actual writing of it is always like, yeah, you got to sit down and do it, and it's painful, and you get it done, and then you edit it a million times and you make it better, and then you're like, oh, I still hate it. Okay. And then you keep trying. But when it's the right ideas, it's always easier, So I tend to live in the space of the big idea as long as I possibly can before needing to put pen to paper. And I was lucky to have Dara as a partner, because she's always like, let's do this, let's go, let's like type, let's go. And I was like, oh, I just want to think about the big ideas a little bit longer. Please don't make me sit in front of the computer. And we hooked up with some incredible writers on the staff of the first season, and a lot of them came back. And they're just so talented. And for me, where I really like to live now, just what I think I'm good at and what I enjoy the most is, sort of the editing part of it, like seeing the thing and seeing what it is and going, oh, this is awesome. And this writer's incredible at this. And this can, then we can do this and we can fix that and we can tweak it like that. And then for me, I think what I largely focused on was tone, because that was really hard. Like the tone of the show, as you've seen, is very odd. And you can see how it's like kind of a tightrope
Yeah,
act.
and I can see that could veer too far one way or the other if you're not careful.
Oh my God. And the number of endless conversations we had about it. And thank God, I was so happy to get John Chu involved in the beginning. He directed the first 2 episodes and kind of helped set the look of the show, along with Alice Brooks, who was our extraordinary DP. She's so incredible. And Mitchell Travers, our amazing costume designer, where each costume was like a character on the show. And Nelson Coates, who did our production design, and Myron Kirstein, who is our editor, our main editor the first year. All of these people, Nathan Lanier, who did our music. I mean, forget about it. These are all of the people that end up kind of helping you get the tone where you need it to be. And I wish so much for young writers that they would have more of a chance to be in the editing room and in the post part of the process. I think that's, in a way, it's like that's one of the barriers to entry to writers getting really good really quickly, because you don't usually get to hang out in the editing room a bunch when you're writing on a show. That's where the showrunner is. And that's, it's just sort of, you just kind of like, people keep you in your box and they say, you got to write the thing. But for me, the next time I, God willing, knock on all the things, get to continue to keep shooting the show, I'm going to make sure I invite writers into the editing room for any part of the process that they want to be a part of: mixes, editing room, spotting sessions for music. I mean, honestly, if you think about it, if you get to do those parts of the process, it teaches you how to be a better writer. Because when you're in the editing room and you're cutting out of a scene earlier than you thought you were going to cut out of it, you go, ooh, I'm never going to be out of that scene. I'm never going to stay that long in this scene. I'm going to cut out right here. This is where the scene really ends. So the next time you write a script, you don't even write what comes after that, because you know where you're going to cut out. So you don't even have the scene go on any further.
Right.
you know where you're going to come in. Going to a music spotting session, when you sit there and you have to tell your composer, okay, I want it to come in right there on that line, right when he says that thing. What you realize later is, oh, that's the emotional moment. That is the real emotional moment in the scene. So when you're writing, you then go and you start hearing the music in your head while you're typing. And it helps you find that emotional pivot point of the scene. And you realize, like, as a viewer, I think people are getting so sophisticated and they don't even realize how much they do already know. But as a viewer, you know if a cue comes in the wrong place. Because if the cue comes in a moment where you're not feeling it, you go like, nope, don't believe it. You know, like you're trying to lead me to feel some emotion that I'm not actually feeling in this moment. So my goal in the future is just to try to help more writers get more access to the parts of the process that they don't usually get to see, because that's actually what's made me really good, is that I've spent a lot of time in editing rooms. I've been able to be on sets. I've been able to, work with actors. And once you start working with actors, what you start to learn is that they all think of the script as though they are the star of the script.
Absolutely.
Even if the person has 2 lines in their mind, they're the star of the script.
Right.
And in a weird way, I love that, because it helps me when I'm writing. I look at it and I go, well, let me just pretend I'm Izzy for a second. Let me pretend I'm the sister. Let me pretend I'm the mom. Hold on. Let me think about if I'm the cop. Okay. Even though I'm the bad guy, I don't think I'm the bad guy. I think I'm the good guy. I think I'm the hero of my own story. So it really helps you to write characters that are way more fleshed out, and to read your scripts from the standpoint of one actor all the way through is to know if you've got something wrong with the character, because they're going to ask you, well, why am I behaving like this in this scene if the last thing that happened to me was this other thing? So all of those are ways in which I think it can help your writing get better.
Dana, you're such a good interview because you've already answered half of my questions.
Oh my God.
No, it's
I was
fantastic.
sitting here thinking, like, I should let him talk. Why am I not letting
No,
him talk?
I want to listen. But from what you said, brought up so many more questions. So I'm going to bring it back a little bit.
Yeah, please.
Created a unique vision in your head. You had your own personal way in. You have a 9-year-old protagonist in a murder mystery. Was that an easy sell or a hard selling?
No. I mean, here's the thing. The difficulty was before we got to the point of pitching, quite frankly. Like, once we were pitching, I felt very confident that we knew what we had, because the hard part was convincing people to think it was something before we got to the process, before we got to the pitching stage. So, what sort of happened was, people in my life, people who, I work with, were like, this does not seem like something you should focus your time on. This is like a really weird idea that you're obsessed with. Like, what are you doing here? And so, or you would tell people about it, and and they would say to us, oh, like a Nickelodeon show, like a kids show. And we were like, no, not at all. Like a scary adult show that kids are going to reach up to watch. And they were like, but that doesn't exist. What is that? And we just kept saying, at a certain point, we finally pivoted, because so many people before we went out to pitch the project just kept saying, who is it for? We stopped like running away from it and just started leaning into it. And instead of saying like, oh, it's going to be for this or that or whatever, we finally were like, you know what? We think it could be for everybody. And we're trying to do something we've never seen before. So there is no comp. You're not going to be able to find another TV show and say, oh, look, this successful thing did it this way, and so we're going to copy that, because we're not copying anything.
That scares them to death.
It scared me to death. I was like pooping in my pants. I was like, this is horrible. This is a horrible feeling. Like, just being that unsure about something and not knowing if something is going to work, and feeling in your gut that there's something there, but not being able to prove it. And because we started the process and didn't come out until like I think it was like 2 years after we started, our show came out. Like, it was so long. I mean, in movie terms, that's nothing, but in TV, it's like an eternity. Yeah, we had already started shooting the second season before the first season ever came out. So we were like, God, I hope we're right, because like, great, here we are.
It's everybody's dream to one day get that yes from someone. What was it like getting the yes from Apple?
It was amazing. It was completely amazing. I mean, I still I was raised just as a very hard worker from a very young age. I've had jobs since I was like 11 years old. And, you know, I came from a dad and a mom who have really strong work ethic. And every summer I was like up on a ladder, like painting the side of my house when I was like 10 years old, or like, I mean, I just worked and worked and worked and worked. And so I've never taken anything for granted, honestly. And for me, the first yes was just as exciting as like my most recent yes, because I don't take for granted. I'm just a person who believes that like it's all going to fall apart immediately all the time. So um, you know, that's one actually bit of advice I would give to all writers, is no matter what you do, no matter how far you're along in your career, every single interaction you have with people, every meeting, every day at a writer's room is an audition to be asked back for the next day. And I treat myself like that. I don't ever think that, oh, I've got it in the bag, I can like rest on my laurels. I work just as hard now. I am such a hustler. I never give up. I work so hard, because if you think that your interactions with people are just your interactions with people, you're crazy. Everything is an audition for the next thing. So I think that's a thing that to keep in mind, because I've sort of seen people kind of like rest on their laurels or sit back and go like, did it, nailed it, screw you. And it's like the work dries up very quickly.
You know, the old saying is you only get one chance to make a good impression. To the writers who are watching this, if you have the opportunity to be in front of a showrunner, what will make a good impression? What are some tips you can give?
You know, when I was an assistant, I was an assistant for a very long time. I graduated from Stanford. I graduated from USC Film School, and for like 6 years, I got people coffee. I never thought I was too good for anything. I always, as I said, hustled. If somebody was like, "Hey, I'm gonna get, you know, can you get me a coffee?" I would go to the coffee place and I'd realize, oh, they didn't tell me what kind of coffee. So I would come back with like 6 coffees and be like, you didn't tell me what kind of coffee. So I got 6 coffees. Don't worry, I paid for the other 5 with my like meager salary. And it was an opportunity to show people my work ethic. It wasn't just coffee. It was showing people how hard I go to go the extra mile, how fun I am to be around, how much I can help them do well in their jobs. So when I worked for guys who were running a TV show, very, very early on, I was their assistant, and I was just supposed to be like answering phone calls and getting coffee. You know, what I ended up doing is they were doing a show about like teenagers, and they were like 2 40-year-old dudes. And, you know, I was in my early 20s. So I was like, well, I'm closer to being a teenager than they are. So I just took it upon myself. You know, they were super busy. I just took it upon myself to make like a lookbook. So a friend of mine helped me out. I got a bunch of magazines. I tore out the pages. I created this like beautiful thing. I mounted it on black paper. I took a silver pen and I wrote each character's name, and I showed what outfits I thought they would wear, what their rooms would look like, what kind of music they would listen to, the look of the show. There was no director on the show at that point. It was just writers. So, but they were the showrunners, and I basically said, hey, here's this book I made. You can pass it off as your own. You can tell anybody that you were the one that told me to do it. Tell me anything you want me to fix. Just use this and use it to look cool. And they were like, this is amazing. And they made, you know, 20 copies of the book, and they walked into their first meeting after their pilot got picked up. They just put down these huge binders. They looked amazing. And I wasn't sitting there going like, that's mine and you should give me credit for it. I was like, who cares? My job is to make myself super useful to my bosses, to help them look good. That was my job. And so I just did that really well. And what it meant is they wanted me around all the time. They never wanted to let me go. They continued to help promote me. They tried, you know what I mean? So that can be a positive side of it. In the room dynamics, I would say I'm a different kind of showrunner in that if you, like the first time I ran my show, I didn't have children, and I would get to work at 6 a.m. and I would leave work at about 2 in the morning every single day. I worked 6 days a week. Now I have 3 kids. So I'm like, I got to get out of here like 5:30. Like I'm coming in, I'm coming out. I'm like an assassin. But ironically, I get way more work done now than I ever did before. I don't dick around. I don't talk about anything besides work. I don't have fun at work. I mean, I do. I have fun at work, but I'm saying like I used to like come in and I'm chatting and I'm like, what'd you do this weekend? And anybody want a donut? And now I'm like, hey, what's up? What do we have to do today? Let's get out of here. Like, I just, if you ever want a 10 to 5:30 job, work for a woman with children. Because I was like, because I'm the mom, I got to get home. Like, I got to go. So,
You
you
know,
know,
you're terrific. I wish I had more time with you, but I want to use
oh yeah,
the.
okay. Give me some more questions. And I
Uh,
want to be really helpful to the people who are going to watch this. So
oh,
tell me the kinds of things
you
that,
already have been. I want to ask some questions specific to this season. Uh, Sometimes writers write things without realizing the consequences of what they're writing. There's an episode 7, where at night in Vancouver, you have several child actors. What was that like?
oh my gosh, all you ever have to do is work on set for like 3 days. And as a writer, you will never type the words exterior night without really thinking about it ever again. I remember I did a movie, How to Be Single, in New York City, and it was called How to Be Single. So it was shot like almost entirely on location at like 4 o'clock in the morning in New York City. It was an entire summer of being awake all night long. And, I really am careful about typing exterior night ever again after that. This show, very specifically, you totally hit the nail on the head. It's really difficult to shoot a show with young people because, as it should be, their education is your priority. They're not feeling like they're at a job. You always want them to feel like they're having fun and they're like just there for a little bit of time, and then you're taking them out and they're going home and having their lives, because this is their lives. These are real children. And so you have to keep the work environment very fun and light for them, very safe, obviously, of course. And, it just basically means that you are very careful about how you write stories. You make sure you build in some adult scenes where there's just adults talking to each other. On our show, we have this unique challenge, which is that the main sort of like thing that I really wanted to do with the show is I wanted to give a young girl a platform that is just as big as the platform that like mostly white male movie stars have gotten throughout time. And I wanted her to get a show that was just as big as Benedict Cumberbatch gets on the BBC Sherlock. And so as a result, the big sort of revolutionary act I was sort of like excited about was, what if we have a young female character who is your access character? So when men watch it, they think she's my girl, like that's me right there. When boys watch it, they're like, that's me. They're not sitting there going, my only access character can be men. It's like, I grew up and all of my access characters were men and boys. That's just the way it was. That was the only thing you could watch. And I loved it. I loved Indiana Jones. I was like, yeah, definitely. But I didn't want to be Marion. I wanted to be Indiana Jones. So it's like I was trying to kind of do the reverse and have people's access character be Hildy, including men and boys. And so when you do that, though, everything has to kind of be through Hildy's like lens, because it's the way you keep the stakes feeling real. And it was the primary thing we were trying to do. And so as a result, you feel it when she's not in scenes. You know that you're watching something that isn't as fully the driver of the story, because she is the audience, right? So that's the particular challenge. Was a lot of weird stuff. And I always joke about Downton Abbey, how like that was like an entire TV show of people like standing in doorways, like listening. Yes, loved it. My favorite. But there were a lot of times where we'd be like, okay, if there's an adult scene happening, we have to have Hildy like hearing it or spying or seeing it. But you would shoot it in such a way that you could shoot the entire adult scene and then be like, reveal Hildy, okay, bye. So that Hildy's like back in her trailer working on her schoolwork. So there was a lot of stuff like that, just like tricks to try to feel like she's there more than she is. And Hildy Vision, by the way, are like
Yes.
amazing
Let's
animators.
talk about that.
Oh, I love it so much. So Hildy Vision was this thing we were trying to do. This was, again, partly me being obsessed with the BBC Sherlock show and kind of wanting us to have our own like visual language for the way that Hildy's brain works. And we were really obsessed with the idea that we not run away from the fact that she's a girl. I've seen shows where they have young leads and they act like they're adults basically in children's bodies. And I wasn't really as interested in that. I was just sort of like, yeah, I've seen that before. That's not special. I mean, they're good. I'm just saying, like, we were trying to do something kind of different that we hadn't seen before. And so wherever we could, we would always try to say, like, look, let's not give her an adult brain. Let's make sure that the way her brain functions is still as a child. And what's magical about it is that she sees the world as a child.
We should explain what Hildy Vision is.
Oh, yes. So Hildy Vision is basically, if she has a theory about something, she will sort of say like, yeah, this is what I think is happening. And then you'll see this incredible animation sequence of her paper, her evidentiary stuff that she has will like unfold. It will be folded paper, or you'll see an entire scene as she's imagining it, but it's folded newspaper, and it's like a bicycle made entirely out of folded newspaper. And that came from the brilliant mind of John Berkowitz and his team at Aspect Ratio. And they worked with us, and John Chu introduced us to them, and they've been so amazing because they became like real creative partners for us, because we were trying to figure out, what does her brain look like? And I always used to say it's a creepy rainbow, which is like, she's not a kid, like she's a little girl. And one of the things I learned from having a little girl is that my daughter, I'm a total feminist. I'm like, let's burn all the bras and, do the whole thing. And my daughter is like in like head to toe princess clothes all the time. And I'm like, whew, this is really tough for me. Ooh, this is going to kill me. And I finally just had to like let go and be like, this is what she wants. This is who she is. Let's do it. So she's in the princess clothes, but she is dirty and disgusting because she is out there, monkey bars all over the place and coming up with big ideas and creating structures and being an engineer and doing all these cool things. And to her, it doesn't mean like a girl in a princess dress. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just part of who she is. And Brooklyn is like that. Yeah. And Brooklyn's like that, honestly. Brooklyn is like, loves like glittery stuff and sparkles and rainbows and unicorns and stuff. So we loved this idea that she could be a serious person and still have this glittery, sparkly, creepy rainbow imagination. And that's not two different people. That's the same girl.
I was a kid who kept a notebook in school every day. So I got
bless.
And you got the coolest credit sequence in TV, which is
yes, that's, by the way, that's John Berkowitz and his team at Aspect. They're amazing.
I noticed that it's different every episode.
Well, yeah. And so thank you for noticing that it's different every episode, because let me tell you, I spent a lot of money on the fact that it was different every episode. And at a certain point I was like, God, I hope people notice that these clues are changing, because this is really expensive for nobody to be noticing.
My last question to you is, when it all comes together, when the writing works and the acting is working and all the pieces come together, I've been on set where I've had to hold back what Oprah calls the ugly cry. Just hitting those moments. How many did you have?
Did you ugly cry? Did you ugly cry during the show when you were watching the show?
Once.
Ooh, I kind of need to know which time it was, because I ugly cried a lot during the show. But you tell me which time was yours without spoilers.
It was an unexpected line that Hildy says that she forgives her father for yelling at her.
Oh, yes. That was brutal. That day was particularly brutal because I was crying so hard and so loudly that they had to move my monitor further away from set because I was so upset. But yes, I ugly cried like Oprah 900 times on set. And I think for me, I had to get a t-shirt that says I cry at work, because I just decided like, oh, I'm the boss. Like I have to own this. I have to be like, this is a power move, man. I'm just sobbing, but it's like strength, man. Part of rejecting like the patriarchy or what a sort of male version of a boss looks like was me just openly sobbing all day long. And I thought about it and I was like, but the show is emotional. I'm supposed to be crying. If I'm not crying, it's not working. So yeah, there was a lot of ugly crying going on set. And I think for me, the most extraordinary thing, I mean, there's so much, I feel like so blessed to have worked with all these people. All the actors are incredible. But for me, the thing that got me to ugly cry the most is that thing that you're talking about, which is basically like, there's this moment between Hildy and her dad, and he yells at her, and then she says, "It's okay, Dad, I know you didn't mean it." And she hugs him. And that kind of encapsulates why I ugly cry so much when making the show, which is that I remember very, very acutely being that little girl and getting yelled at. And, I love my mom, my dad, they're the best. But my dad, a little bit of a temper, he would yell at me sometimes. And I remember immediately thinking, I know he regretted that. And I know that hurt him and I have to make him okay. And so that really came from like a very personal place. And yet now I'm at the exact age where I'm also the parent. So I'm also the one in the room who is occasionally losing my temper because I'm frustrated or I'm exhausted or whatever. And I'll bark out something and I'll see my little kid's face just kind of like, just feel
Yes.
so betrayed. Yeah, feel so betrayed.
Taking everything.
They take in everything. And so for me, the show, why it is so poignant is a lot of it is about memory and nostalgia and about that weird liminal space between being a kid and being an adult. And for me, I occupy both spaces still. I still feel like a kid, and yet I'm so fully an adult, that I get emotional on both sides of it. So that's sort of what kills me about the show. And Brooklyn Prince's performance is honestly one of the most extraordinary things I've ever seen. Watching her have, she's not an actress. She's a very professional actress, but she's not trying to act a feeling. She is feeling the feeling in the moment, and you are recording it. I mean, it's
Comes through.
so profound, and it comes through. And I hope honestly that she'll be, considered for nominations, because one of the main reasons, as I said before, I wanted to do the show is that nobody takes little girls seriously. And I think she gives like a really extraordinary performance on this show. And I think if she were an adult, maybe she would get a nomination. And I think because she's a young girl, I think there's a possibility she will get blown off. And I hope that is not the case, because I think
I'll do this. For any Emmy voters out there in the acting branch, I'm in the writing branch. You have my vote.
Yay! I love it.
Pleasure
Thank you
speaking
so
with you
much.
today, Dana. Thank you so
Such
much
a
for doing this.
pleasure. Oh my God, you're the nicest. I appreciate being here so much. And I am sending love and support to all the writers out there who are feeling a little crazy during this time. You know, if there's anything I would say, it's like, try to do something during this time period that you would never normally allow yourself to try to do. The experience of me going from comedy into like a mystery dramedy space is, it was really scary, but I did it, and it was incredibly fulfilling. So maybe try something that you would never normally do right now, because like you can't fail. The whole world is failing right now. We've all failed. Everything is a failure. So in a way that's freeing. So good luck with all
And
your
the old
stuff.
saying is, in crisis, there's opportunity. So take the opportunity.
Exactly. And or just like never get out of bed, which is also fine. I'm doing that too. I'm wearing like full sweatpants. From everything below here is just sweatpant material.
I won't tell you how many calories I've consumed since it started, but that's a different conversation.
My friend, I am 100% with you. There is a cookie jar of shame in my kitchen right now that I'm just thinking of visiting.
I'm keeping jelly bullets afloat.
Oh my God, I love it. Well, it was so nice meeting you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And thanks for watching.